1, 2, 3.
Hi. Oh, recording. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to put this on my YouTube.
Oh, I do the same thing.
Yeah, because
Um,
I've never told my story to anybody, so meaning where I could publish it. So since you asked,
sure.
I want to do this. So anyway, so this is Ken or Stephen Retz, is that right?
Retz. Yeah,
Very
Stephen
good.
Retz. Yeah.
And he was Latter-day Saint, or a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We both do videos. I've got my channel. It's called For the Love of God Network, and I've also got one called Latter-day Saint on Fire. Stephen, what do you got going on?
So I have a blog and I do YouTube. Here's if you want, there's the link for direct to YouTube. Here's a page so people can go search. I have most of them there, but anyways,
Very good. And I'll make sure I put those links on with this video. And so the reason we're doing this, because me and Steve kind of got together through Facebook talking about he I guess he at least looked at the advertisement I had for the video I did with a group of
yeah, I do mean to look at it. I haven't yet,
yeah.
because it sounds interesting. I'm working primarily right now, working on a program that I'm going to be putting out for free to let people search restoration scriptures. So,
That's great. That's great.
um,
Yeah, so like I said, then we got to the point where I think you're going to come on tomorrow. Is that right? Because
yeah, I'll come tomorrow.
you are an expert, like over the top compared to what I can do with
I don't know about
I
that.
said compared to me.
Still, I'll be honest. I feel like an amateur.
Yeah,
Probably, if nothing else, I've just dedicated. I keep doing it. There are some things I don't know.
yeah.
There's some things I do know to a certain extent that I wish I had unlimited time to go learn more even on. I have a huge list of stuff I want to study, but I just keep whittling away. My big thing is I don't stop. So,
Yeah, and we don't, because there's a passion towards there's something driving us. It's more than just a connection to a church or a theology, but there's something real about that connection between us and God, and that kind of just continue to just find every nuance that you can find to figure out how he relates to us as much as we relate to him.
sure. Well, the name of my blog is Seeking Yahweh. That's what I'm
That's great.
seeking
That's great.
Him. So,
So he asked me about uh I left the church and I came back, and he was kind of interested in that. And I said, well, this is a great time for me to go ahead and tell my story a little bit. Now, the
sure.
last time I had an audience of one, or I mean, I'm kind of like what would you say, embellishing on that idea because I tell my story all the time. But one time I did have an opportunity to talk to a person about my story. It was in the doctor's office, and we sat there for 2.5 hours after my appointment talking about my life.
Uh,
And all she did was give me a shot in my knee.
uh,
So, so it's I figure if I can entertain one, I might be able to entertain more than just one. So anyway, and he asked me about why did I leave and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's important so that people understand who I am, give you guys a little bit of background on where I come from, and that's important. And it's some crazy stories. So you can look these things up online, Google. Some of the things maybe a little bit skewed based on people's fantasy world, but I think there's a lot of truth to it too. So my origins are Native American, also European. So I have Chickasaw and Ojibwa. I know I'm butchering that, but if you watch anything by Wayne May, he talks about the Ojibwa culture and how they are very Hebraic in their
Okay.
in their, in
So
their background.
if I can interject a little bit, were those ones in the north or in the south?
Well, my family comes from Oklahoma.
Okay.
My again, Smith Paul, who founded Paul's Valley, is actually from Carolinas. I can't remember if it's South Carolina or North Carolina, but he ends up in Oklahoma. He rescues a brave from the Chickasaw Nation. Now he's European. All right, he's actually a cousin of John Paul, who is the John Paul Jones, as we know him now. But John Paul was the father of the Navy of the United States. So I'm related to him also. So, and my lineage goes back all the way to Adam. I can show you that if I want to scroll through that. It's a long ways, but on my family research. But I've got kings and
Well, on that, you only have to go to Noah. After that, we know everything goes there.
yeah, exactly. Actually, all you have to do is get to Jesus Christ, and there's one strain that actually goes through Jesus Christ and identifies his children through Mary Magdalene. Again, people.
So are you of Judah then? Because
what's that?
Well,
people
for
embellish
going through Yeshua, that there's some controversies with that, but let's just leave that aside for now. Yeah. That he's Judah. He's not all the 12 tribes.
Right.
So are you Judah?
See, like I said, I think within all that, what I'm saying is they didn't stay private within their own tribes when they were finding wives and husbands.
Correct. Now, so along those lines, though, you're only of one tribe.
As far as my patriarchal blessing, it shows me as a tribe of Ephraim.
Okay. Mine says Ephraim also, which I do believe that.
Yeah.
Also for other reasons.
So I don't know if I'm adopted in. I don't know if they embellish the idea that Jesus had children and I go through them.
Yeah,
it's kind of sketchy in that way. But it's
so mine says loins, which I do believe. It's actual loins and not adopted.
Right.
For other reasons also, but I'm a little different on this than most places. I believe you're the tribe of your father. And that gets into a little controversy because most people will say through your mother.
Right. Right. So I would say that through my fathers, which again, my dad was Ojibwa, Chickasaw, and then so four grandfathers back, like my father's, anyway, however that goes. Smith Paul married when he was out in Oklahoma. He seen a Chickasaw brave being attacked by a bear, and he rescued the brave from that bear. And so they adopted him in to the tribe of Chickasaw, and it became very so there's a close relationship. Eventually, John McClure, who was the first husband of my great grandmother, who actually marries Smith Paul after John McClure dies of rabies, maybe, but we know he died, while Ella Teacha was still able to have children. All right, so eventually Smith Paul marries Ella Teacha, which is the mother of a man named Sam Paul, which is my great grandfather, and he is a thug of a lawman for the Chickasaw Nation and for the U.S. Marshal. So in that movie, Rooster Cogburn or True Grit, remember that John Wayne said that he's the only one that can go into the Indian nation to get find Lucky Ned Pepper, all right?
Like,
Because
get a what?
to go, if you ever watch that movie True Grit with John Wayne.
The name sounds familiar, but I don't think I've
Yeah,
seen
so
it.
anyway, I'm telling you this story. So what I'm saying is John Wayne, who's that famous cowboy actor, actually the inspiration for his character is my great 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 grandfather.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so again, it has a connection there. So like I and my grandfather Sam Paul actually knew, some say 12 languages, some say 17. So he's very fluent in a lot of different languages of different tribes in the area. And then you have his nephew, Sam Paul's nephew, is Fred Waite, who ran with Billy the Kid in the war, the Lincoln County War. So I got another cousin. I got Daltons that are my cousins, and I've got a very colorful past in that in my father's lineage. And so we weren't members of the church at all. We didn't have anything to do with a lot of religion back when I was growing up till about the age of 8, and then we moved up to Madeira from Bakersfield. That's where. So again, you think about if you know anything about old stories or movies, the movie or the book. Oh, I skipped my mind for a second. The Grapes of Wrath. The Grapes of Wrath. That's my
Okay.
family. All right. That's a portrayal of my family and their trek out from Oklahoma to California, where they end up in Bakersfield and become migrant workers. And we worked and we were still in the fields when I was a young child. And I would always help my great uncle, who partly raised me at the time too. But so we were still. I'm 58 years old, so I still got some connection to the fields in some ways. So, but my grandparents and my dad were field workers. Actually, my dad finally got into construction.
Field workers, as in the farm, correct?
Yeah, they're not a farmer. We're talking about the laborers.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about the Okies that come up from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl years. They ended up in California and worked the fields.
Okay.
So anyway, so my dad didn't have much learning. He was dyslexic. So he was an alcoholic. His mother was an alcoholic. His dad disowned him. Didn't want nothing to do with him. So it wasn't an easy life for anybody. We were impoverished. We lived very close to the fairgrounds in Bakersfield, and it was a very typical third world country kind of situation in a way. I mean, I personally knew the murderous thugs, the Brimmages, that lived right around the corner from us, and I was like 5 years old, knowing these guys, and so we
I
had a
don't know
lot
who they
of.
are.
Huh?
I don't know who they are.
Yeah, you wouldn't know. These names wouldn't, but I'm going to bring that. Well, the reason I bring up that name Brimmages. So, about 50 years later, I'm going to a Baptist Bible study in Madeira, and there's this lady there that told me that she was from Bakersfield, and she had, and I said, and she told me of her past life and drugs and stuff like that, and I said, you didn't happen to know the Brimmages? And she said, yeah, I actually knew them quite well.
Hmm.
So that was kind of a neat thing that this woman, 130 miles north, knew the same family I knew in our walk of life. And this is 50 years later, that we associate with the same people. And so, like I said, so again, I'm just talking about the impoverished life, the thug life that we lived in, and things were happening that were quite crude in that days, even with the children. And so it was demanding, to say the least, but a lot of fun. I mean, we had we had all, so, but there was churches on every corner in this area. So we go to
Sounds
different,
like the burnover district.
yeah, something like that. So we go to one of these churches, sometimes weekly, but most time just once in a while. But we'd get there, and the first thing I remember doing whenever I was about 5 or 6 years old, whatever, when I could read, I memorized the 23rd Psalms, and that was pretty easy for me. Actually, it came pretty. Even though that I went to remedial reading and comprehension classes throughout all my school days, and even into the military. When I went into the military in basic training, they were sending me to use remedial comprehension and reading classes because I always struggled in some way there. So again, by the age, so like I said, my background, impoverished, not a lot of education in our lives. I did school by telling my family that I was sick all the time, and they love me enough to believe me.
I think every kid does that one. I
Yeah,
know I
yeah,
did it a
yeah.
couple times.
But even at that, but they weren't concerned about me getting to school that much, if you can understand what I'm saying. So, but I survived, and eventually, like I said, so my dad's an alcoholic. My mom is not really in our lives. My great grandmother, who moved in with us whenever I was born, actually raised us for up till about the age of 10. My
So can
dad
I
was
ask
a
something
great.
real quick? Were you a convert into the church?
Uh,
Or did you
by the
grow up in the church?
Yeah, by the age of 9 years old or 8 years old, when we from Bakersfield we moved north to get away from the thuggery down there. We just moved into another place where it was, no good, not even any better. But we were away from what we knew. So we moved up north to Madeira, where my great aunt lived, and she was a member, and I think she was a member since '55, but I can't really uh, tell you the truth on that. I have to look back at my
Vague memory. So what year did you move up north? Just so I can locate.
1973. So in
Okay.
'65 I was born, and '73 we moved up here.
Okay.
And then by September of '74, I was baptized into the church. And
On your own or with
well, that was
other family
well,
members?
that's where the it gets juicy still.
Okay.
There's a lot of things going on in the life. My
Yeah.
great aunt supported my family in a big way. She was a very big part of us, just because she was just a good woman. But financially, she was available too, in a lot of ways. And so we depended on her for a lot of things. So my mom and dad, maybe they didn't like the church at all. They didn't want nothing to do with the church, but they knew that if they had rubbed the stone the wrong way, it was not going to turn to gold, but to dust.
Sure. Their supply of help might disappear if they go too far.
Yeah, so
Right.
they didn't want to disappoint her. Like I said, my great aunt was a respected person, but my great grandma was even more respected. She was the center of the family, and she lived with us, and she was actually she was very gifted in a lot of ways. I'm talking spiritually, uh, I take on that same spiritual gifts when she was in 1932, when her boy was 12 years old, her oldest boy. She's laying on her bed in a one-room house. She lays over onto her side, and she looks down, and she looks, and then she turns back up, and she says, Marion, which is her oldest son, says, I see you in your coffin. And the family's sitting at the table with Marion, and they say, oh, Ma, you're crazy, kind of thing. A week later, he was murdered, or not murdered, but he was shot with a 22 by one of his cousins, whose last name was Dalton.
Okay.
So Daltons were, like I said, our kinfolk back in Oklahoma, And if you read anything about the Dolphins, they were a ruthless gang also at one time back in the 1800s. But anyway, but she was a seer. She wasn't a member of the church until like 1973 or something like that. But she also.
So when you say seer, I would wonder if maybe you mean more prophet.
Yes, prophetess.
Yeah, prophetess, because there's a couple of those in the Bible, right?
Right.
But the reason I would say that is in the Book of Mormon, it talks about how a seer can translate.
Yeah,
right?
okay, yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that for me. So like I said, she's a prophetess.
Okay.
Right? She's a visionary. All right. Not only that, she made a couple of voodoo dolls and stuck pins in them, and the pins took effect on my mom and dad in a serious way.
Okay, so I'll just say this. That's paganism. That's not from
Well,
Yahweh.
I'm just saying, but
Um,
again, taking my own experiences and their crazy stuff, she could wish things on you and make things happen. She didn't understand it. Maybe she didn't understand that part because she didn't really understand that connection. But I would say that for my own life, I've had some things happen where I wish things and they quite detrimental to people. And I didn't, it scares you. Not saying it ever happens in the literal way that we're talking about, but when you connect a thought that it's in your head about somebody, and that thought it comes exactly as your thought was.
so
It scares the daylights out of you.
well, and we'd have to get in more details, but I'll just say something real quick if it's okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people think things and positive, negative towards others, and they happen. I personally, I would attribute that to coincidence, unless you're claiming to have the sealing power, which I don't think you're going to be claiming to have.
Yeah.
But anyways, I do understand why a lot of people would
There's
think that,
in there. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't agree with it. So, but I can appreciate why you're saying that.
Yeah. So remember when Elijah had them children calling them bald headed?
It wasn't Elijah. It was Elisha.
Elijah. Thank you very much. See, that's
and also and that has a lot of significance to it. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but
just give me a little bit of brief what you understand.
Well, so there was 42. Okay. 42 is in a number that the occult evil people like. It has to do with oppression. They were trying to oppress. Also, Elisha had the sealing power. Okay. And they called him bald because they were trying to say he did not have God's authority. Hair in the scriptures is an idiom for authority.
Right.
And in addition, bears have to do with physical death. But if you go against Yahweh's actual anointeds, there are problems. Okay. And so I do know in the LDS temple, this is common knowledge, so I think it's safe to say that that there's a statement that you should not go against Yahweh's anointed. Okay. Right. We will, and it goes off of that. Now we will disagree who Yahweh's anointed are, but the actual statement is from scriptures.
Yeah.
So
okay. So anyway, so like I said,
and that's part of the reason just why David wouldn't do anything against Saul. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that brings up another whole can of worms, but anyways, with the Elisha and the two bears, if I think it was two bears, I'd have to double check. It was bears. Yeah. Okay. And then the 42 that were mocking him. There's a lot in there, but he had sealing power.
Right.
He caused something to happen with his voice, just
Right.
like Peter in Acts 2. So, but anyways,
Yeah, and I understand all those things that you're saying. I'm just saying, whatever we can call it coincidence, probabilities, and stuff like that. But when you have all these other things that go on in your life that are outside of the norm of living, then you start to wonder if you can understand what I'm saying. Because I'll get into
sure.
some of the stories that I personally have been a part of. But my great grandmother, that wasn't the only time that she had, as far as seeing her son casket by her bed, and then a week later he's shot dead, and then buried in the same exact casket and flower arrangement as she's seen on her by her bed. She had other
Oh,
incidents.
sure.
Yeah,
I think uh, I don't know your grandma, okay?
yeah,
But the voodoo dolls concerns me. But well, let's take an example from the New Testament. Capheus, right? The I think it was the Sadducees. I can't remember if he was a Sadducees or Pharisee, but he was the high priest for them at that time, and he gave a prophecy, and he was not a good guy.
right.
So, I mean, even in the Old Testament, Yahweh caused the donkey
To talk.
talk.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't want to get
so Yahweh will use the evil people for his good
yeah,
purposes, right? The question though is how consistently is it? And
yeah.
because one time, I don't know what to tell you, but multiple times, maybe start talking and then looking to what's being taught and stuff. But anyways,
The point is, I know what you're saying. Having voodoo dolls is pagan. I get it.
oh
Just saying.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm just saying that.
I would.
I was
would
what I
go
was
further,
saying.
but I'll try to be some respectful. So
Yeah.
I will,
So
but it's
so
not
what I
good.
was doing is being anecdotal, basically, but telling you some of the things that happened in my life, knowing these
Sure.
things. So as because this was about, like I said, we were again steer back to why did AJ get into the church? Why did he leave the church? And then but
Yeah,
you got
I
to
know.
know
And
you
for the
got
most
to
part, you're just kind of giving your back history to
yeah.
help give some background for the reasons why you joined the LDS Church.
Yeah, and basically, who was the influence and how did they influence my
Sure.
mind? And so again, by the age of so I'm back. I'm in the church by the age of 9. I'm getting baptized not because of somebody's convincing word. It was just because it was a good idea at the time. You can understand what I'm saying. Really,
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's no connection between what they were saying to me and the fact that I'm doing something uh, because I'm convicted to what they're saying. I'm doing it because people are saying, "Hey, you want to you want to do this thing." You know what I mean? So it's different. You know what I mean? I don't understand the magnitude of what that means to go into the waters of baptism.
So I was baptized in the church at 8. I didn't understand everything. I'll be honest. I'm 43 right now, and I study. I don't understand everything now.
Yeah,
It I will never understand everything.
right. But that's why we do
Um,
what we do, because there's a passion about, like I said, connecting how God connects to us and we connect to God. And we do that by continue to observe and to uh, mentally picture how that works out, I think.
right. Well, on that, I do think. Well, I do believe that Yahweh is trying to connect with everybody that's alive,
Yeah,
even the wicked. Okay,
yeah,
to help turn their hearts to Him and to His righteous ways.
sure.
Now, I will also say that Yahweh speaks more to those who keep His commandments and who love Him than other people, but He's always trying to connect to everybody.
Sure he is. Sure he
Yeah.
is. And I don't he never stops, and I think it's an eternal thing. But I wanted to illustrate something while we're going here.
Sure.
So again, does he connect with the wicked? Eventually he does, if for whatever, for his purpose, and I'm going to explain that and how that works out. So during my life within the church, one of the things that was kind of unique in Madera, California, that happened while I was in church active for like a year and a half after I got baptized, was there was a couple. This is 75. All right. There was a couple from Ghana who they had joined the church, and they lived in Madeira and actually went to church with us. And this before the priesthood ban was lifted.
Right, which that was 78, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
that was killer for me. I was like, we had such great rapport with them. My great grandmother, we used to go over to their house, and these were great people. And my great grandmother was influenced by them so much that she started wearing the muumuus that they would wear.
I don't know. Is that a shoe or
Muumuu
something?
is like a dress with kind of this paisley drawings on them or something like that. Just very decorative,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
And so because my great grandmother would just not wear normal Americanized clothing, nothing, nothing flowery or anything like that, just normal.
Okay.
But when we got a hold, when we went and really became really good friends with them, they befriended us so much. Like I said, my great grandmother, she took on their clothing. She wore it for the rest of her life.
Well, I just looked up some of the dresses looked nice.
Yeah. So anyway, so again, that was kind of neat. My church life, I started, I think I remember some of the guys that I would go to church with, but not really too well. It wasn't until I really became a deacon that I started finding people that I knew and I remember, kind of thing.
Okay.
You know what I
Sure.
mean? And even at the age of 12, I really didn't have a connection to the church. I was still, if somebody had a cigarette, I was taking a puff or two or whatever.
Oh,
And
sure.
I was, and at the age of 11, I was still taking a sip of beer once in a while. I mean,
So I never had beer until like I was older, like 30.
my first beer was at 2.5. I was so, because my cousins were watching me, and they ain't got no brains, but my cousins were watching me, and I was, kind of like a fiery, like just bouncing off the walls, they said. So they give me a bottle of hot beer, and I went to sleep soon after I finished it. And I'd be out in the garage with my dad and my cousins, and they would let me sip on their beers, smoke their cigars, and stuff like that. This is at 5.
Yeah.
So
we don't need to get into it, but the history of alcohol in Utah and the church is interesting. But
yeah, it really is. Yeah. But so, like I said, that's the kind of world I grew up in. So it's very decadent. It was very, and the things that happened sexually were very, very prominent around there too.
Yeah, because you were probably teenager in the 60s.
No, we're
right?
talking about 5, 6, 7 years old.
Oh, okay. So I got.
And we weren't engaged, but we were trying.
Sure. But you would have been 15 at the end of the 60s. So I don't know exact range, but.
No, I was 5 years old at the end of the 60s.
Oh, okay.
I said I was 58 and I was born in 65.
Oh, okay. I got my math a little mixed up then.
That's all right. That's all right. But yeah, so there was things going on. Like I said, a lot of corrupt things in my life. So it's a very, very wicked life that I grew up in. And just, then by the age of about 10 years old, my mom and dad had finally left the scene and left me with my great aunt, who eventually raised me until I was 18 years old when I went into the military. And through that time, when I was 12 years old, and and the priesthood was presented to me to, as to become a deacon. I went to the railroad tracks, which was next to the house. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I asked and I asked and I asked. Nothing, not a peep. You know what I mean? Because I really wanted to know if this was for me. And then I'll never forget this. I was a friend of mine came later on, and I was still hanging out at the tracks, and he had a 22, and he says, "Hey, you want to shoot this 22?" I'm 12 years old. And I didn't think anything of it, and so I shot it. And then when I went to my dad, or when I went home, he says, "Hey, what were you doing over there?" I was like, "Nothing, nothing." So I lied to my dad, and that haunts me to this day. It still does. I hate that moment in my life where I lied to my dad, and it just burns me that I would do something like that. And he gave me a good whipping. Said, you could have killed yourself, because remember, his uncle had got killed by a 22 back.
Okay, so he probably had some strong feelings.
Yeah. So he didn't know his uncle, but he knew but my great uncle, the brother of my that uncle, grew up with my dad, and they were very close. So there was a lot of connection in there. So
quick question, if I can interject real quick.
Yeah.
You mentioned how your parents left and you're living with your great aunt. Your great aunt was the one that was LDS, correct?
My great aunt was LDS first. Then my
Right. On the time of you leaving, was that when you were living with your so when you joined the LDS church, was that when you were living with your great aunt, or that was before?
Okay, so let's do this again. At 9 years old, I joined. I stayed in for about a year and a half. We became inactive, and then and like I said, timelines are really sketchy, so we have to do the best we can. And maybe by the time, I know that absolutely by the age of 11, I had moved in with my great aunt, and we became active again into the church. Now my dad still lived on the property, but
so you joined the church
at 9. You're cutting up right now.
Before you were living with your great aunt, then?
Yeah, I joined the church before I was living with my parents at the time.
Oh, do you hear me?
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit, but I'll wait for you.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it?
Okay. Well, sometimes my internet has little issues.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right. So you're living with your great aunt now.
At the age of 11, and then my great aunt, who lost her husband, first husband, in 72, and that's part of the reason we moved up there, is because my dad could help with the things around the house, at her house, but also for our benefit too, mostly. But so eventually my great aunt gets remarried, and my great uncle, who becomes my great uncle, he's in the picture, and so he raises me along with my great aunt. And my great grandmother lived with us for a little bit, and then she moved into an apartment. And I've got one brother, and he joined the church the same time as I did, or was baptized. And we stayed pretty active, even though there was things going on in my life that weren't right. We were still, pornography eventually comes into my life. My cousins were into it, and people around me were into it. There's magazines all over, and I think
in the 60s, the mainstream started pushing that a lot more too.
So this is 78. I go to high school in 79. I graduate in 83. But again, there's a lot, going on in that lifestyle. My next door neighbors, we'd watched videos together and everything else. And, it's just a real, so I wasn't living the right, I wasn't living a saintly life at all.
Well, there's only one that has never sinned, right? So, but different people have different sins and more different.
Yeah. Well, there's
passions or whatnot to try to get rid of that. But
yeah, I don't again, whenever we get done with my story, you'll understand that I'm not concerned about my past anymore. I know what my past is, and it's better if I tell the whole story than if I don't. If I leave stuff out, then you don't understand why it was so
Okay.
important for some of the other stuff that goes on in my life. And so by the age of 17, my great aunt had pretty much became inactive. My great uncle had already been inactive for years after that. And then I became inactive.
How come she came inactive, if you don't mind me asking?
It wasn't, there was no value.
Okay.
And that's why I left, is because there was no value in being
Sure,
there.
sure. So where they're teaching the same thing year after year, right? It got maybe a
Well,
little
yeah,
boring for her.
yeah. I didn't see what the world had more to offer.
Okay. It didn't mean anything to
Yeah,
you.
I did
Okay.
again, it was like I'd rather be playing pinball or pool or bowling or playing sports or
Sure, sure.
whatever that looked like, because church didn't have the same kind of draw as these other things did.
Oh,
And
no, that's fine. I was just trying to
yeah,
clarify because when I was in, was it when I was a priest? It would have to be a priest. I did shut-ins, and so some people were kind of inactive, but it wasn't by choice. It was just because they couldn't leave the house, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, that's happens. And so for me, it was just like it was boring. I didn't, and again, I'm going to teach people something. If you don't plan on going on and especially for me, I never had any plans for marriage. I didn't. I tried to talk to people about going on a mission, but nobody really drove me to there. You know what I mean? They weren't willing
okay,
to drive me to the MTC metaphorically.
sure, sure, sure. No, that
You
makes
know what I
sense.
mean?
So
Say,
was there
yeah,
not a big push at that time that every member or
yeah,
every
there was a big push, but not for this whole
night?
for that,
Okay,
not for me. You know what I mean?
all right.
And so because there wasn't, and because my family situation, and my great aunt and people around me were really into what I needed for my future, didn't have really a lot to do with spiritual things, if you can understand. So they
Sure.
wanted me to go into the military to get started in life, if you can
So,
understand.
quick question, if you don't mind. So,
Yeah,
did you actually formally remove your name, or you just became an inactive and just stopped going?
yeah, I just inactive, but
Okay.
but whenever I went into the military in basic training, they said, hey, on Sundays you can go to church or you can stay at the dorm, and I chose to go to church. You know what I mean?
Okay. So, did you go back to
I
the
go back,
LDS church then, or a different one?
it's still the Church of Jesus Christ that I
Okay.
go back to, that I'm still a part of, and I'm still there. But it only lasted until boot camp was over, and then there was no more reason to go to church anymore. And then I tried a couple more times between the age of 18 to 31 or whatever that looks like. But in between there, I got back into the church for a little bit, for like just no more than 6 months, and then or actually 3 months. But I'd met my future wife. We got married. We weren't faithful to the church at all, and so we never went back. And
Did you guys meet at a singles ward then, or
yeah, we
somewhere
met
else?
at Singles Board. Yeah, up in where I was in the Air Force in Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield, California. So, and it was not a pretty picture all the way through. Now we had some good times, but a lot of it was uh my past, my influences, uh violence and things like that crept in, on both sides, infidelity on her side. Yeah, I've got one child from myself, from my own loins, and I have 8 children. So
Okay.
my second wife, she had 4 children, and so I adopted the two youngest of hers.
Yeah.
So, but again, it was quite so I got a colorful family, to say the least, and it's a great family. Love them all. But and I'm reminded about I'm reminded of Jesus Christ in that way, and how his father is God, and his stepfather is Joseph.
So I believe differently. I believe Joseph, Mary's husband, is actually Yeshua's physical father.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And I know that's a very unique belief.
Right.
Though there is some stuff in the JST, how Joseph Smith restored text, that gives, I believe, gives support to that. But
yeah, well, there is. I wouldn't completely say you're off your rocker, because there is a lot of. I just read this thing today from Christopher Davis, I believe, name on Facebook and it was talking about the adoption that was happening at the time, where children were born from concubines and people like that. But until the announcement was made of whose child this belonged to, there was that it had to be publicly made aware of the child's lineage in that way. And so I would disagree with you. It is the father's, but
I understand. It's
I could understand.
I'm fighting the buck on this on many aspects for many people, but
Yeah.
um,
But I understand where your point of view could come from. You know what I mean? I'm not disregarding what you say. I'm just saying this is where I go. You know.
oh yeah, no, that's fine. I know all of Christianity teaches that Joseph, Mary's husband, was not his father, right? Or physical father. So I understand the pushback, so I'm not worried about it.
And what and no, I don't want to get into it. We'll get into that discussion some other time. We got
Oh,
to
okay.
do that one.
I'm happy to,
Yeah.
but we could do it another time.
Yeah, because so anyway, so like I said, whenever I think about my children, I think about that relationship I have with them, and they're not physically my children, but in my heart of hearts, they are my children. I declare them as my children, if you can understand that.
Sure. Right.
And so if it be that Joseph was not the physical father of Jesus, he treated him as such. If you can
correct. Right. I understand where you're coming from.
Thought he was best thing since, but again, so the complicated family I have doesn't just miss my love for them. It just means I find ways of loving them even more. But like I said, I got divorced, or actually, before I got divorced, by the age of 31, when my last child, when the last child was born to my first wife, she decided she wanted to go back to church. Probably feeling, like, hey, I could disguise this, or I'm feeling like dirt right now and I need to get clean. You know what I mean? Whatever that reason was, but it forced her in back to the church. And I went, and I was like, we're into pornography, where we have all kinds of physical altercations at home and all that kind of stuff going on, and there's a lot of good there, because I got my children, I do a lot of things with them. Our marriage is what it is, but I didn't know how bad it was, because you never know how bad things are until you remove yourself from the situation, and you look at it and you're like, oh, that's really bad. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. I think removing and also knowing what the standard is also.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
so anyway, so we will go back, and my thought is waste of time. Nothing's going to happen. I've been there, done that before, and I don't see any reason for us going back. I didn't say it publicly, but I thought it passionately in that way. And so we were going, and here's the craziest thing. I cannot tell you for the life of me what I'm doing 26 years later with the kind of passion that I have for that connection with God. I can't tell you the moment that it happened, if you can understand that.
Oh, sure. So some people it's gradual, and sometimes, and for some people it's just like an instant of a
Yeah.
big bang. So
And I had a lot of opposition at the time, you know, start talking to people at work. My aunt, who was anti-Mormon, she had
this is a different aunt then, because
yeah,
one aunt
different
kind of
aunt, different aunt, my mom's sister.
okay.
She's anti. My parents are not too hip on the church, tell me everything bad about it. And so, but my great aunt is going. It was kind of funny. 2 years before I started back to the church, I was over at my great aunt's house, and she had and the bishop was there, and he says, "Hey, AJ, you ever plan on coming back to church?" And I said, "No. Whenever my wife wants to go back, I guess I will." 2 years
Sure,
later,
sure.
2 years later, don't tell God something. But anyway, so again, I'm back in the church, and now I'm talking to people. I'm being challenged by things, by their understanding of Latter-day Saint theology and things like that. The Adam God, polygamy, Mountain Meadows, whatever else.
So since you brought up Adam God, do you believe Adam God theory from Brigham Young, or
It's complicated.
since you brought it up?
It's
Okay, we
complicated.
can leave it at that. We can talk another
Yeah,
time.
yeah, it has a very complicated understanding because it because there's some elements there that are real truths, but then there's some things that you can't explain because again, Adam doesn't have a physical body at time of creation.
Well,
I mean,
we can talk it more because
yeah,
I don't believe it. I believe the Book of Mormon actually teaches against it, but we can get into details another.
there's some things in there, but Adam being our God, our only God, the only God that we know of, there's a way to explain that actually makes sense, even within theology. But
Well, we can go over that over another week.
and some other time. But anyway, so like I said, I'm being bombarded. Even my friend gave me a tape with Walter Martin's tape, which is where he goes through and he tells you how evil the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is, and how we have a different God and everything else. I listened to these things for months on end, almost every day.
So on to give support for you, I'm ex-LDS, right? So there's some things I don't agree with, obviously,
Right.
Because I left by choice. But I will also say a lot of the arguments that are mostly out there against the church, I don't find them credible. Even though
every time in this tape, I'd listen to it and I would find rebuttals against everything this guy said, and it was kind of
well,
just a side note on the Walter Martin story. Back in '72, he's going around, especially Southern California, and he's challenging every Latter-day Saint for an open debate. So Brother Johnson takes him up on it, and he cleans his clock. Eventually, right there in front of Walter Martin's people. So Walter Martin sues Brother Johnson and the church for defamation of character. And there's where the start of the decline of the fire in the bosom for the saints happens. Because of that moment of the case was thrown out, but the church decided no longer will we do public debate.
Oh, the LDS Church didn't do public debates,
right?
Okay.
Because if you ever get a chance, there's a talk, 30-minute talk by LeGrand Richards, where he's talking about his former missionary efforts in Amsterdam, and he's up there doing public debates. But now he says, well, we don't do that no more. And this talk that he did in like 76 or 78. So there was a turn away from that public debate because of that experience with Walter Martin. And you could see where that no longer do we need to engage anybody, therefore we don't have to study anymore about the gospel as fervently as we did at one time, because there was reason.
That could be.
You were going out to
You're a
battle.
little older than me. I've come across people talking about how people used to study more than they do now.
Yeah.
We may have different opinions of why that happened, but it has gone down.
Yeah, but I think the decay of society is part of it. But
Yes, I think that's part. I think there's multiple factors to
yeah,
it.
but that is a turning point where you can point to and say, if they're no longer saying we have public debate, then there's no reason for us to really engage in the deep and really challenge ourselves and the testimony. And now you isolate.
So I would disagree about that because the reason to get in that should not be debates, in my honest opinion. It should be because it's on your heart to do it. But with the deeper understanding, you can help people see what the text is actually saying, right? And so it should it should be as from your desire to know Yahweh and His ways, not to go to a debate and say that I'm right and you're wrong.
Well, here's what you have in societies. All right. You have those who are supportive, all right, and those who are warriors. Those who are supported. All right. So you have three: the supporters, the supported, and the warriors.
Sure. Right.
And when you take away the warriors' motive of why he does what he does, then you start to lose the people that can actually give a lot of support to those who need to be supported. Because
I see what you're saying, but this is where I would disagree what the motive should be. But I understand.
Yeah, but I'm just saying people are different. We all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will also say, just in defense of your church, scholarship in all religions is down, not just the LDS one. So
yeah. So what I'm saying is, like I said, let's go on to where I was in the story. Okay. My life. So again, I'm getting all this stuff, and even now I'm going online and I'm having debates with people that are against the church, and the tithing comes up, and
so what year did tithing come up for you, just out of curiosity?
So this is probably about a year and a half or so after, or a year after that I started going back to church. So it'd be about 2000. All right.
Okay.
And so I was after work. I was in the building by myself. I'm a maintenance person, and the plant that I worked maintenance, is separate from the shop. So I would be in the shop, and after work at night, I go into a room and pray. And so I knelt on my knees one night, and I'm dealing with this thing, but I'm not really verbally talking about it. But I might have mentioned it in the prayer. But the chapter or book and chapter came to my mind, Acts chapter 5. Okay. Now, I don't know the Bible. You know what I mean? I barely know anything, but I don't know the Bible that well. You know what I mean?
Well, so most people don't know their scriptures.
Yeah. So I write that on the back of my hand, and I go home and I read that. And that's where the husband and wife who had sold the farm, who were supposed to give all that they had from the sale of that farm to the church, and they lied about it, and they died at Peter's feet.
Yeah, I believe that's actually Acts 2.
Acts 5.
The main issue is the
Ananias
history that you're bringing up, right?
What's that?
The main point is the history, and it's Ananias and his wife.
Yeah, Acts chapter 2 is the day of Pentecost.
Right. But then it also has that too. But I think it's both. But maybe
believe me, I remember that because it hit me like a ton of bricks when I.
Okay. So I might getting these chapters wrong a little bit myself. But
so what I'm saying, yeah, because it happened to me, so I'm more attached. Sure. I can understand that.
But yeah, I'm more worried about the histories than where they're located.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's because of modern society's made me lazy, and you can go
Yeah.
on your favorite search and go find it.
Yeah, but
So-
see, for me, it like I said, it was such an event in my life that I can remember things vividly that way. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So again, I read it. It says it basically told me if you promise, you better keep your covenants, or you could die at Peter's feet. That is what happened to Sapphira and Ananias, but that is figurative to us too, because when we go to the next stage of our existence, we could die at Peter's feet if we didn't keep our covenants. And metaphorically,
I see what you're saying. I'll just say a couple things. Peter had sealing power, but Peter is not at the pearly gates like a lot of Christianity will say.
we can get
Second
into
Nephi
that.
9 and other places really brings out how it's Yeshua at the gate, right?
Well, again, there's separate argument. We got a lot to talk about. We have a lot to talk about. We could do this all
Sure.
long. All right. But anyway, so again, it hit me. Keep your covenants. And it includes paying your tithing. You know what I mean? That's the way
Right.
that's the way it was presented to me in my heart and my mind. So I'm like, see, it's one thing to be able to just quote a scripture and say, you pay your tithe, are you willing to rob God? You know?
Yeah. I'm aware of the chapter.
Yeah, Malachi. But I'm just saying, so there's easy ways to, but whenever it's given to you in a way that kind of like impacts your life, like, yeah, absolutely don't. There's no way I'm going to deny that, you know. But anyway, so I get that, and I wasn't able to, like I said, no matter what I was going to quote to this guy, it was never going to be enough. But it got me to a place where I was absolutely locked in that I keep my covenants.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
It's good to, like, brought it in the New Testament. It's good to give a reason when asked,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you don't have to make it so they have to believe it, because there's a lot of, if a lot of your building blocks are different,
Right.
you're not going to come to the same conclusion, even if you do give your reasons.
Yeah.
Right?
And so, but I have to be converted first before I can teach anybody else.
You should be that way, and it says it in the
Well,
deeds.
I'm just saying.
But a lot of people do teach who are not converted.
Right. But what I'm saying, to be an effective teacher is what I would say.
Well, I would go a little further as a help from the Spirit, right? But
well, yeah. Well, the Spirit convicts you, and therefore it's an extension through that conviction. So anyway, so like I said, so I had that experience, and then one day, a friend of mine who we'd had many conversations, he told me some things about Joseph Smith and his goings on. I'm on the side of a 4-foot table, 4x8. All right, so 4x8.
okay.
I'm at the shop, metal table, and he's about 6 feet away from the table on the other side from the 4-foot side. And
Okay.
and so he's walking through and he says, you know, AJ, no reason Joseph Smith created the church as a con man was to get gain and to live a polygamous life.
Well,
and he said it.
He wasn't very. If it was to get gain, he didn't really make much.
Okay. Well,
and we disagree about polygamy. I believe he
yeah.
it, but
well, what
anyway.
I'm saying is, he said that to me, and
Sure.
he said it in a vile way, and I don't know what took me over at the moment, but this is how I responded. I said this. It was like the roar of a lion that came from me. It was that powerful. Okay. It was the first time I ever knew that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. I said it this way: there is nothing you or anyone else can say that would ever convince me that Joseph Smith was not a prophet of God. And after that moment I was absolutely convinced that there's nothing that anybody could say that Joseph Smith that could convict me of saying that Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet of God. But he walked on. He didn't have another.
For sure.
And I had to
So, but it does sound like that was a big event for you,
yeah.
right?
Well, there's bigger events than that.
Oh,
It's just that's just tip of the iceberg, the tip of the mountain there. But or whatever I'm trying to say there. But what I'm saying, he just walked on and he was like, and I had to convince him like 2 weeks later that it's okay that we have these conversations. That I would never blast him like that ever again, and we can continue to have good conversations if we, if we're so inclined. But he was telling me, man, after that, I like, and he was my mentor as an electrician. See, I'm an electrician, industrial electrician. I do
okay.
houses a little bit, but I work mostly at I work at manufacturing plants where I do controls and stuff like that and
Okay.
diagnose stuff like that. But anyway, so and I'm really good at that stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Well,
Not
that's good.
I didn't go to college. I didn't go to college. I went to the Air Force, basically just not any, educated at all for whatever reason.
Well, I find those who are more self-educated generally have more drive and more passion.
Exactly. So
for it.
anyway, so then I'm trying to figure out timelines. So you'll just have to
Sure,
in
that's fine.
in the audience just pretend like I've got this stuff well in hand. That's why you keep a journal when you have great huge events in your life because it's helpful. All right, so
Yeah, it's good to keep a journal. I'm not very good at it.
yeah. So anyway, what had happened whenever I took my job, the job that I was in at the time, when I had this experience with this gentleman who crossed paths with me, uh, while I was before I took that job, had lost one job, and then I said to my great uncle who had helped raise me for a while, that was my great aunt's second husband. Uh, I joined up with him in his shop. He had a small shop. He was building farm equipment. Would rebuild tractors and stuff like that, and get them running and stuff like that. And I said, "Hey, love to, work this thing out so we can share time together and actually, build this thing." And he loved it. He loved the idea, but this opportunity for this other job compelled me that I needed to take it. And he was disappointed greatly, all right, because he was the kind of man that wanted to see this thing continue on. He was 80 years old, and he wanted to see his work continue on forward. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so for a year, we didn't have any communication because he was mad, and I didn't know how to approach him. I loved him, but I didn't know how to approach him. And so he gives me a call about a year later, and he says, "Hey, Jay, I do you mind coming over to the house and we could talk about if you could help me pick up a tractor and disc, um, so that to because I'm getting an old tractor and a disc so I can rebuild them." He's 80 years old, but
That's pretty good.
he's got some health problems, but uh,
Well, staying active helps you stay alive.
yeah, exactly. But so I said, yeah, I'll come over and we'll talk about it. And I had no problem doing it. And I said, so we were sitting there. Like I said, I'm really engaged in spiritual things at the time. And we had never talked on a spiritual platform at all, especially since he had never been in church since I was 12 years old. And I'm 33 at the time, somewhere around there, 32. So for 20 years, he hadn't been to church. And I didn't think nothing of it. I figured just didn't have no connection to it, didn't have no feelings about it. But
Sure.
we're sitting there and we're talking. We start getting into that conversation. And here's a man that is 80 years old, a well-seasoned man, and he sits there and he's sobbing profusely about how much he knew the church was true and that he could not go because he would cry so bad that he felt like people were looking at him.
Okay.
And so that was a touching moment. Now, why that's important? Because a week later or so, I watched that man try to drive that tractor and that disc up on the trailer, and it flipped on top of him.
Oh, that's too bad.
his dying words 2 weeks before that meant everything to me.
Sure.
And whenever, like I tell you, I don't wish, whenever I would think about things deeply, a year or so before that day, when I think about my great uncle and how he would pass, that's how I envisioned it. We'd stopped working together. I thought he was done.
Sure.
So again, that's just a small sample of what's coming up. All right. But yeah, that huge impact on my life. Man who hadn't been to church for 20 years tells me how much he knew the gospel was true. And then a week or so, a little bit more than a week later, he's dead underneath the tractor he was trying to load.
Sure, I can definitely see how that would have an impact.
So anyway, so then life goes on, and I'm really impacted by that moment. And me and who's my ex now, still together, and she's watching children for extra money, but let's make sure we get focused back to where I want to go first. So I would come home every day and watch the BYU channel. I was watching everything and anything that had to do with religion. I would watch the Shepherd's Chapel with Arnold Murray, and I would watch anybody in every radio talk show that I could listen to. Hank Hennegraaff at the time, whoever it was, I would listen to him. I was just all over it. And so I came home one day after work, and I sat there on the couch, and this lady was giving a lecture, and she quoted from the Doctrine and Covenants, "The field is white and ready for harvest."
It's DNC4.
Yeah. I was overcome with the most powerful experience I've ever had. I'm serious. It was like I sat there and I was scared to death of this impact, or this whatever you want to call it. It just sat into my body, and it was there. Scared me half to death, and I'm sitting there, I'm sobbing, and I don't want to move because the feeling is so incredible that even though I was scared, I didn't want it to leave. And I'd like, so the experience was over, and I'm thinking to myself, what in the world? You know what I mean? How many times I had even heard that scripture? I mean, I went to seminary when I was in high school a little bit, so I'd heard that scripture before, and I've heard it after. Has it ever?
Sure. It never meant a whole bunch to go really study it before.
Yeah. So it's like, so it happened on that Monday. And so then I think it was Tuesday, or maybe that later on that night. I didn't tell anybody about my experience. It was just personal to me. But later on that night or the next day, my wife told me that we were a grandmother and her granddaughter were coming over, and the granddaughter's like 9 years old, and my wife would watch her after school and stuff like that. And so they came over Wednesday. My brother's getting married in the temple that day, about 2:00. They came over about 11. And we're sitting there and we're talking, and they happen to be black. All right. And we're sitting there talking and about things and arrangements, and hey, can you watch her on Sunday? And we said, hey, we go to church. We didn't say what church we go to, but we go to church, and do you mind if we take her with us and all that kind of stuff, normal stuff. And then
Sure.
she's like, yeah, no problem. She didn't know who we were as far as religiously. And then it later on, 12:30 or so, I said, hey, we got to go to the temple because we're going to meet my brother there after he gets married. And she says, you're Mormon. I said, yeah, and that's before I took the name Mormon. I threw out the door, and I'm a Latter-day Saint. But
Well, I embrace it. The
yeah,
word Mormon.
so, yeah, I
Mormon
did.
means covenant.
Well,
So
anyway,
anyways.
but I said, yeah, we're Mormon. And she was like, I'm Mormon too, but I haven't been for 13 years. I really want to go back, but I never had anybody I could go with. And where we go, it's a white, predominantly white a congregation. She's black. Her granddaughter is black. So she comes back to church, stays a faithful member till the rest of her life, becomes temple endowed. Her granddaughter joins the church, and she brings a whole slew of others into the church. So was the field white and ready for harvest? Absolutely. What an incredible story. You couldn't put those, you couldn't make that story up from nothing. You know what I mean? But it happened to me, you know what I mean? First I get this
Sure.
on Monday, and on Wednesday it's validated by an event. So you could, so that was one, there's a couple of them. And then eventually I realized this: whenever I have a prophetic dream, my prophetic dreams have a lot to do with just my normal day of life, really. But when the dream and the event takes place, or the dream happens and then the event takes place, then a traumatic experience I will have in my life. All right. Sure enough, one of the prophetic dreams was happen, and then the event takes place soon after. And that's when at the end of and then I left my first wife. Traumatic experience. If you ever had a divorce, anybody had a divorce, you know how traumatic that is. So yeah, that was.
I'm divorced.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
So yeah, so I left my wife at that time, and so again, and then and I'm going to jump forward a little bit for now just to validate that idea. So a year and a half ago, when I had another prophetic dream, I woke up that morning. I told my wife that I just had a prophetic dream, and whenever the event takes place that was in the dream, then tragedy will strike our family. All right. So that was so the event takes place 3 days after the dream. That night I lost a really good friend from church. The next day I lost a dear friend from church. The next day after that, my mom breaks her hip. 2 days after that, my cousin dies. Another day after that, another real dear friend of ours dies, all within a week.
Through that.
And
That's a lot
all
of
that,
loss.
and that wasn't the only ones. There was more after that died recently or within that time frame. And then I just had one a few months ago that, again, I had a prophetic dream, and sure enough, my cousin died the day of the prophetic dream. I didn't want.
Well, do me a favor and don't dream about me, okay?
That's crazy stuff, man. It happens. I'm telling you.
Well, yeah, there in the scriptures it talks about how people all dream dreams, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the prophets interpreted dreams in the
Yeah,
scriptures.
absolutely. But going back to whenever I left my first wife, all right, and then I married my second wife, and we were soon married. But whenever I thought about my dad's death, all right, I knew. I said, this is where he'll be when he dies, and this is the person will find him. And a year after me and my wife had got married, that's exactly what happened. My second wife, that is.
Okay.
So crazy stuff. And but again, I get all these things happening to me. But again, every time I had a question about anything theological, I was always given revelation or something that would connect it to me.
For sure, something came in your mind, right?
Yeah.
That helped you out.
Or a sequence of events would lead me to that. Like one day, and this is before I worked at a glass pipe. One day I was just kind of be bopping around. I was like, so the earth will be burned for 1,000 years. All right. So what are the elements of the earth and what is that going to look like after it burns for 1,000 years? Oh, it'll turn into a glass sphere. All right.
So where do you get that the earth is going to be burning for 1,000 years?
Jacob
Jacob, where?
5.
Do you mind if we take a minute to look?
Yeah, I believe it's Jacob 5, but somewhere in Jacob's writings, you'll see where the earth burns for 1,000 years. That's
Yeah, so what so
It's after the
that
millennium.
might be trying to get the imagery of the millennium, but we're
Yeah,
not,
it's after
the
the
Earth's not
millennium.
going to be burning for 1,000 years. So, do you want to, we could go through Jacob 5 and look at just at the verses. I don't know if you want to share your screen, or I can share mine, because I can bring up the LDS app with
Yeah.
the scriptures and we can
Go
look.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so you need to enable it.
Oh, okay, yeah. Can you help me understand how to enable?
Yeah, so down in the menu where you hover at the bottom,
Yeah.
there's a little thing that will come up, share. On
Right.
the right of that button, there will be a little up arrow, and in
All right.
the advanced settings, you can then set it to allow others to share.
Okay, let me get there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I only know that because
Okay,
I do
I think I
every
got
week.
it there.
Okay.
So
Yeah, okay. So let me make my font bigger. Oops, wrong button. It's just, I know appearance. That's probably good. Yeah, that probably looks good. So let's go look at burned in Jacob 5. So here's one in verse 7. And it came to pass that the master of the vineyard saw it, and he said unto his servant, it grieveth me that I would lose this tree. Therefore go and pluck the branches from a wild olive tree and bring them hither unto me, that they will pluck off those branches which are beginning to wither away, and we shall cast them into the fire. So this is not the earth, this is people or branches that are being that represent people, right?
Right.
That they may be burned. And so to me, this goes along with the burning that's going to happen at the beginning of the 7th millennium, which goes with fire and brimstone that's going to be coming. Okay, so let's go look at 9, because I see another burn in there. Take thou the branches of the wild olive tree and graft them in the stead thereof, and these which I have plucked off I will cast in the fire and burn them. So that's people. That's not the earth, right? They not cumber the ground of my vineyard. The vineyard's the earth, right? But what's getting plucked off are branches, which is people.
Could you go to Jacob 6?
Sure.
And
sure.
At the top there, at the heading there, it says, the Lord will recover Israel in the last days. The world will be burned with fire.
Yeah, but that doesn't say for 1,000 years.
Okay, well, I'm just, let me, but
yeah, I don't know how much you know about the mighty and strong one. That's another subject, but he's going to cause fire and brimstone to come before Yeshua comes. That's what it's talking about.
Yeah.
Let's look at the verse. So I see verse 3 is highlighted with burned.
Right.
And how blessed are they who have labored diligently in his vineyard, and how cursed are they who shall be cast into their own place, and the world shall be burned with fire. So, to me,
can I just say something else?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so I've been challenged by another person on the Doctrine and Covenants in Joseph Smith writings. So the 1,000 years, okay, maybe I embellished that, but the point is, if you look in the Doctrine and Covenants, it says that the earth will receive its paradise of glory. And that paradise,
I do understand it says that. That is
okay,
a section
and
that I do not believe is authentic.
okay, but then there's another place where it says God lives on a sphere of glass.
Where's that?
Doctrine and Covenants. There's one in 104, I believe. And then
Do we mind if we look?
absolutely go ahead.
Sure. Here,
I
I'm
don't
going to
mind
share
that you learn. No, I said it the wrong way. No problem. Let's look.
So,
Because there's questions in 104 that are asked about the different things in Revelations, and the questions asked about the sea of glass mentioned in the
I think the one you're thinking 77 and not 104, but let's
well,
check.
there's two different references.
Okay, let's go look at 104. So I just brought up 104 and I searched for glass and I don't see it here.
Maybe it's in 101. It's been a while since I've
No, that's fine. You're on the spot, and I don't always remember all the sections myself. So
let me get there too.
So 101 doesn't have glass.
Working on it.
No, that's fine. Let me see if it's in 77, the one that you're thinking. So 77, which is a section I don't believe is authentic, but I can understand why you would. That one does have glass in one verse. Let's see if it's the one that you're thinking of. Verse 1, what is the sea of glass spoken of by John? The 4th chapter, 6th verse of Revelations. It states, it is the earth and it is sanctified, immortal, and eternal state. Is that what you're thinking, or you're thinking a different?
That's one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Then the other one's in section 130, verse 7.
Okay. So that's another section I don't believe is authentic, but let's go look at it. Verse 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they reside in the presence of Elohim on a globe like a sea of glass and fire, where all things for their glory are manifest, past, present, and future, are continually before Yahweh. Yep. So if you believe those sections are authentic, I can see where you get some of what you're saying.
Well, considering that I thought about the sea on the glass thing about how if the earth burned for 1,000 years, what would be its final status? And it was glass because of the elements that are built within the earth. Then you have
so not everything that's burned turns into glass. That's sand, and it's more melted that causes sand into glass and not burning. The burning would be the heat to cause the sand to turn into glass.
But it what I'm saying is I've worked at a glass mine, so I understand some of the elements that actually have to go in there to make glass, silica and sand and then there's other properties that go in there. I can't remember them all, but what I'm saying is, for me, I could having this conversation. You're saying that these are not valid, and I'm like, I'm sorry. That's where this came from. So
no, that's fine. So I understand why you believe those sections. And
yeah, so if I'm thinking that way, and it's and then I'm provided or just then it materializes within me, saying it turns into a glass sphere, and then I go to these verses later on, which I'm compelled to because of a conversation I'm having with another person that's disagreeing with the Doctrine and Covenants, and then I'm finding them there. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool stuff.
For sure. But the one thing that both of those sections don't say is that it's going to burn for 1,000 years.
No, but that's fine. But I would say that each millennia or each period of time that God speaks of is within 1,000 years.
So it depends on context, but yes. The creation history is also prophecy of the history of the world. And so like the first day kind of goes with prophecy that goes along with the first 1,000 years. So I in general, I will agree with you on that.
So anyway,
We may disagree on some of the details, but in
right,
general,
right. Yeah. So like I said, now I'm married to my second wife. I got two. There's 4 children plus the 4 I have, and there's all kinds of great things. But one of the things that happens is with the second youngest boy, at the age when he was like 5 years old, it was given to me to know that he would turn Judas on the family. And you
that's
would
too
have
bad.
never thought this when he was 14 years old. Right? He was on fire with the gospel. I told him about Mount Mizzen, polygamy, and all these things. I taught my kids everything about the gospel, everything about our history, as much as I could. Within a year, I had to put him in foster care because he was that dangerous to the family. All right. So
Hard to hear that.
it happens. God had prepared me for that day. You know what I mean? He had prepared me. He said, look, it's going to happen. And you know what? Let me give you another story before that. All right. So me and my wife had decided, we live in Madera, California. We had decided that we were going to move to Utah. And this is like 2 or 3 years before he's actually put out of the house. All right. And me and my wife had discussed it. And then the time came within 3 or 4 months that we were on our way out the door. All right. So we were at conference, at state conference. Larry Gelwitz is speaking. He's the guy that was portrayed in the movie Forever Strong. All right. So he's speaking, and I get this thought in my head: we're not to move to Utah. That he was using that idea of moving to Utah because he wanted us to straighten out our finances because we were paying everything off as fast as we could because we want to make this move. All right. And then I got into the vehicle with my wife after conference, and I told her, and she says, "You always have these ideas in your head. I'm telling you, we're moving to Utah, and I don't care what you say. And if God doesn't want us to move, then He'll tell me." I was like, okay, fine. Well, less than a month later, we were coming back from Monterey on our from our anniversary trip, and she says, "I have something to tell you." I hate when they do that to me, but anyways, she says, "We're not moving to Utah." I said, "Okay." She says, "Well, don't you want to know why?" "Yeah, I'm kind of curious." She says, "Well, I was in the backyard. The backyard's a disaster at the time. We can't get grass to grow or nothing. All right, weeds won't even pop up most of the time, but they do." But she says,
Okay.
"I'm back there. I'm just kind of looking at the things in the backyard and trying to figure out what we can do back here." But we had planned still on moving, you know what I mean? So I don't know why she was back there thinking about it if we're planning on moving. She says, all of a sudden, these pictures started to come before me in my mind, but I could see them vividly. And they showed my family in the Southern California, showed my brothers, showed the mountains, showed the ocean. And after all these pictures in the backyard and how it would be and everything like that, after those came up, the words in my mind were told me, "You're not to move. You were to stay here." And that happened 3 times in a row, right there, that one moment. And so she validates something so we're not moving. All right. So the boy's still a great child. All right. But next year, I have to put him in foster care. And we didn't move to Utah. Crazy. So anyway, so now like I said, my dad had passed in 2006. And the reason I bring that up is because another event that happens. See, my dad was very worldly. He'd stopped drinking for 15 or 13 years or so, and then all of a sudden he's back on the bottle and he's on it hard, smoking still, and he's not doing much. A wonderful man. You couldn't ask for a better man besides those hangups he had. And I think that has to go back with all the things that's happened in his life and the turmoil that happened with not having a mother. And
So some people drink to forget. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that's
That's
for
a
him.
lot of what he was doing, and the smoking. So again, he'd passed away, and I didn't think much of it because we had talked religion. I read him the parts of the Book of Mormon and the Bible, but he was really not into it. And so I was like, so my thought in my head, well, he doesn't really want to. He doesn't want anything to do with religion anyway. While he's here on this earth, so why do I really concern if I do his work? And besides that, most of my children had already left the church. So, but I wanted one of the boys that knew him well to stand in the waters of baptism for him. All right.
Okay.
Never happened. And eventually, my youngest is 14, and we're in soccer, and I'm a coach. All right. But one night I had this dream on Sunday. And whenever I have prophetic dreams or revelation, either 3 months later or 3 days later will I be given a validation of what's going on. So on Sunday night or Sunday morning, I was dreaming. And in this dream, I was driving a bus, and in that bus was my soccer team in the back. All right. And so we go on an off ramp that's up, and then the bus goes off into the side down, and we're okay and everything. But I'm down there working on the steering wheel that came off, you know? So, and then all of a sudden, and whenever I dream about my ancestors or my dad, I always see them, but I really never talk to them in a way, you know what I mean? But this time I didn't see him, I heard him. It says, "What are you doing?" Well, actually, it says, "What you doing?" And I said, "Just working on the bus." They said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Did you need something?" And he said, "Yeah, I could use your help." And I said, "Okay, I can come over right now and help you." He says, "No, whenever you get time." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I woke up and I told my wife, my child about that dream. I said, that gives me an indication, at least I'm 95% sure that he wants me to go do his work in the temple. And I was like, but I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know, but I'm pretty sure. And so on Wednesday at 4:55 in the a.m., 20 minutes before my alarm goes off, actually 25, this voice tells me to read Isaiah 56, wakes me straight up out of a dead sleep. I'm not dreaming. It just wakes me up with that piercing voice, that roar, saying, read Isaiah 56. I finally woke up from that shock, and I said, Isaiah 58? No, 56. If you go to Isaiah 56, it shows where it talks about keeping the
Remember
Sabbath day holy. But then it says, even them I will give mine house. And it goes down where it says that we are, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon my altar. For mine house shall be called the house of prayer for all people. So
right.
that's telling me get to the temple.
I can see how you could interpret it that way.
God knows how I would interpret it. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure. Now,
Yeah.
just so you know where I'm coming from, I see the Book of Mormon teaches against baptisms for the dead. And another thing just to keep in mind, Joseph Smith taught revelation can come from three sources: from Yahweh, from Satan, or just ourselves or other men.
Right.
So I do understand that you believe it's coming from Yahweh. I don't, but we can respect
but
that.
this is how I would say if it's from Yahweh or from Satan. Does it bring me closer to my Father in heaven and Jesus Christ? That's the question. Does it make
Sure. And I think that's a good question. I would.
If it draws
I
me closer,
personally have a different question that's similar, Does it contradict Yahweh's already established word or not?
Yeah. And we can go through the works for the dead and all that later on, but that's what happened. All right. So anyway, here's the crazy thing about that story. All right. So I read that verse and I read it in that interpretation. Okay. And I admit it's interpretation. Even my dreams that I have are interpretation. You have to, because crazy stuff, and then I'm like, oh, now I get it all. It's like
Oh, sure. It that verse definitely talks about temples.
right.
There's some things in it that I wouldn't mind talking about, but we're doing your story right now, so
Yeah.
we'll
So
worry about that another
the
time.
reason that I say that is if you look at the Old Testament, you try to pick out those things about Jesus Christ and the prophetic, the prophecies that are connected to him. The event has to take place before you connect back to the prophecy.
Not necessarily, but I do see what you're saying. If it's already happened, it's easier to go back and connect it to it.
Yes. But
hindsight is a lot easier than before sight.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't that many people that believed that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God, whenever he was doing everything he did and saying everything he did. So obviously, for those that lived 100, 200, 300, 1,000, 2,000 years later, we can really go back and say, okay, this was the life of Christ, and what does it look like compared to what was prophesied? And it's a lot easier.
Right. So if you want to this is something else you can look at another time, but here's a recording I did where I went over JST Genesis 18 and 19 and talk about how it's a prophecy of Yeshua in his last hours.
Cool. That's cool. We'll get to we'll make sure we link everything that Ken is, or Stephen, I call him Ken all the time, but
that's
Stephen says are his links, and we'll make sure we add those to the YouTube. Anyway, so again, remember in that dream, my dad had said, whenever you get a chance, not in a rush kind of thing. My soccer team is in the back of the bus, and what comes up for 3 or 4 weeks before we can get to the temple, soccer on the nights that we can go to the temple. So I wasn't pressed. I went to the temple that day because that was I'm like, I'm going to the temple. I don't
sure. You felt a surge of urgency, right?
But I didn't, but we couldn't do his work for 3 or 4 weeks. You know what I mean? And so there was that comfort level that I was given, knowing that I didn't have to rush it, but he wanted it done, that kind of idea. But anyway, so like I said, why did, in all these events that have taken place in my life, talking to you and you're saying, hey, I deny the baptism for the dead and all the rites that are performed for the dead, and you also disagree with the temple work and stuff like that, or the temple itself, maybe.
I disagree with LDS Brighamite temples,
right.
Because the Book of Mormon does have a temple in it. The Old Testament has a temple in it. Prophecy in the Old Testament talks about how we're going to have a temple. Even the Book of Mormon talks about how we're going to have it in Independence, Missouri and stuff. But I do believe they're very different than the LDS Brighamite temple.
Yeah. But I understand. Yeah, like I said, I don't discourage anybody for believing what they do. I'm just saying this is where I'm at. So anyway.
Sure. And another time, maybe we can get into details, because there's a place to respecting other people, and then there's a place to help people see things from the scriptures. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways.
So again, there was an event, and I even have it on. I posted a Facebook message talking about not Dallin Chunks, but Elder Tom Perry, saying how he will be missed and everything else, but we'll meet again there. That was and I didn't know anything about his health, but that was one day before his death. All right. Okay. And then
you're taking that statement to be prophetic.
It is what it is. I'm just telling you the story. I'm not telling you.
I know. I just so. But Simpsons, are you aware of the Simpsons? Who isn't aware of the Simpsons, right?
Yeah. Well, let me.
They have things that are prophetic too. So.
Yeah. Let me continue with that story. Yeah, after Boyd K. Packer dies, now I don't know the the order in which the apostles are set at, who's in place, who would be the next one that would come to the next
Oh,
beat.
sure. You don't know their ordination order.
Right. And the name Russell M. Nelson comes into my mind to being the next one who would be the president of the apostles. And then it was given to me to know that the next two apostles that would die. And it happened exactly like that. And crazy stuff. I'm telling you, man, it's stuff. This stuff is crazy. All right. I've got stories to
Well,
tell.
I do understand some of these things, like the one that you just shared. I think you take it as proof for what you believe. I'll be honest, I don't.
No, like I said, I'm telling you my story. I'm not telling you.
Oh, sure.
To convince you, because me,
Well,
some of the guys says I don't want to be alone at the table of God. I don't want a bunch of people crowding in.
So, just a thought.
Yeah.
You should try. If you think you have the truth, you should be trying to convince me.
No.
Because
the reason I have what I have is through personal experiences that I've had. If you can understand what I'm saying. But you can't step into my life and have those experiences, okay? I can tell you about my experiences. The only reason that Jesus Christ could not manifest a larger gathering to himself than he did was because he didn't have anything to convince them with. But because of the fact that he dies, is resurrected, and there's enough people out there that know of that event, now the word's getting out there that this guy is credible, and the people that were attached to him intimately, the apostles, have a story to tell, and a real story to tell. It's the witnesses that manifest the story greater than the actual event that takes place.
So I would disagree. Okay. And for one, we can go Alma 32, where some people believe because they are convinced to believe, and then other people believe because they're just prepared to believe.
Yeah.
So some people need convincing.
Right.
Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The bad thing or good thing is where you are at the end of your life, aka enduring to the end. But we can go look at Enos, right? One of the few books that have one chapter in it in the Book of Mormon. When he became converted, right after, he had this burning desire to go help other people come under the truth also. So, and we can see that with Alma the Younger and many others. There's a difference between forcing and so maybe convince might not be the right term, but this is where maybe I'm trying to help clarify a little. There's wanting to bring people into the truth and help them understand versus hiding your light under a bushel.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I definitely don't hide myself at all.
Sure. No, yeah, you're on YouTube, so you're definitely not hiding.
Let me say something because you remind me, because Enos is a very dear friend of mine, and in a connection to what his story is, where he's desiring to know if he is forgiven. Joseph Smith,
yes,
the same way. All right, very much connected to these men, because I told you about my past life and how corrupt that life looked. Anytime that I would take the sacrament, or I would enter into the Lord's house, the temple, I would feel like I did not belong. I did not deserve. I was not clean. Even though that I trusted the atonement with all my heart, I could not come to grips with my past in any way. It tormented me. It haunted me. I can't tell you everything that I've done in my life because it's hideous. All right?
Well, and I don't need to know.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, but I'm just saying. So my mind said, I don't belong there. There's no way that I would ever be able to be in the presence of my Father in heaven and Jesus Christ, because I have not answered for everything that I've done to the authorities, all right, to the bishop, to the stake president, or anybody else.
Sure. I
felt like I
don't believe
should.
you need to do that, but
Yeah,
I
but
will say from what you're just.
but for me, I'm just saying for me,
Sure. And
I
I
wanted
have
to
a
be.
post about that if you want. I can put it in the
Yeah,
links.
yeah.
But
Oh, absolutely. But
so one thing I do think you're saying, from what I'm hearing from you, I do believe you had a baptism of fire, which is a good thing.
yeah. but but here's the thing: is I wanted to be excommunicated. I wanted to be completely expelled from the church. Why? Because then I could get back into the water of baptism over the next year and finally rid myself of everything that I'd done wrong. I trusted that. If you can understand what I'm saying.
Sure.
But because of that experience with that dream and the next event that says, hey, come to the temple, it assured me that no matter what I had done in my past, that God accepted me in his presence. That's huge.
For sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's huge.
Oh yeah. Well,
It meant something. Like I said, if people want to come because of my convincing stories or whatever, great. But in the end, you have to have your own experiences before you can get locked in.
Oh, right. There's.
And what
It's
do
a
you trust?
process, right?
And what do you trust? You know,
Well, ultimately, you should trust Yahweh,
but
but
I'm just
at
saying.
the same time, like, you're
But
probably at least somewhat aware of lectures on faith, right?
what I'm saying is, you already put in this idea that it could be either Satan or God or Yahweh that has communicated with you. So I would say this: I've got a choice.
Oh yeah.
But either I trust what I was given and trust that it was from God, all right, and go before him at the final day of judgment and let him say it was Satan who had deceived you, and I'd be like, but Father, how could I ever be expected to overcome such such things in my life that were convincing, so convincing that they even fooled me, who was illiterate, basically, who did not have a good comprehension? How could that be? Now I could at least have a chance to meet that standard of saying, no, I get it. It was just too much for you. All right.
So,
You're okay. But let me finish that real quick.
okay, sorry.
The other part of that is if he has communicated with me and I denied everything he communicated with me, and I stood before him and he said, here I give you all these things to be an assurance of what of the power in which was governed through the Church of Jesus Christ, and you denied it.
For sure, I understand where you're coming from.
I don't think he could narrow the gap of that gate going to hell fine enough to keep me out.
I understand where you're coming from. So
that's where I'm coming
from. So I'll just tell you, Muslims say that they get experiences from God that tell them to join Islam, right?
Yeah.
Catholics say that they get experiences from God that tells them to join the Catholic Church.
Right.
I will tell you that I have experiences that God told me to leave the LDS Church. Right. So, but that's not going to convince people. I'm happy to share any of that with people. I personally myself tend to focus more on what scriptures say than my own personal experiences. Okay.
Yeah.
But so I forgot one thing I was going to say, but the other thing that I did want to say before I got too much far is,
Yeah.
so this is Lectures on Faith 256. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is because we're talking about, helping other people coming to truth. Okay. So just FYI, Lectures on Faith was in the D&C, Doctrine and Covenants, since 1835. It was removed in 1920. Before that, it was called the Book of Commandments.
Right.
So Lectures on Faith is the doctrine. Lectures on Faith is the doctrine from the D&C.
Okay.
And just a little tidbit for you. If we go look at this picture. Oh, no, come on. Well, there we're just fine. See, on the left
Yeah.
is Lectures on Faith, okay?
Sure.
On the right, it is 1835 D&C 101. It has to do with marriage. Anyways, that's another can of worms. But
Yeah.
my main thing that I want to bring out here is how the Lectures on Faith is bigger than the Commandments. And
Okay.
back then, when this was printed, 1835, that's a big deal because printing was expensive.
Sure.
But these lectures were so important, they made the font bigger. Okay. But
Yeah.
anyways, but I want to bring out here, in lecture 2, for those who want the link to get all of it. I mean, I'm not the only one that has it online, but I'll say I'm partial to my stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
Who isn't partial to their stuff, right?
Exactly.
But it brings out how the importance to get people starting to learn about God is us, those who actually do believe in God. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, let me just read it. We have now clearly set forth how it is and how it was that Elohim became an object of faith for rational beings, and also what foundation the testimony was based, or how it was started. Okay. Which excited the inquiry and diligent search of the ancient saints. How do they start looking for God? To seek after attain the knowledge of the glory of Elohim. And we have seen that it was human testimony and human testimony only that excited this inquiry. So we get other people excited to learn
Yeah.
about Yahweh Elohim, or
Yeah.
God, Jesus, whatever term you want to use for it. I'm
Right.
not a sacred namer, but anyways.
Yeah.
In the first instance, in their minds, it was the credence they gave to the testimonies of their fathers or people before them, or your neighbor or whatnot, right? This testimony having aroused their minds to inquire after the knowledge of Elohim, the inquire frequently terminated, indeed always terminated, when righteously pursued. So people have an interest, but it would not go anywhere unless they did it in the correct way. In most glorious discoveries and eternal certainty, aka second comforter, or making your calling election made sure, so on and so forth, by
Yeah.
multiple names, right? But anyways, but it starts off with us helping others having a reason or a desire to do it.
Absolutely. And
So
that's a lot of what I do. I've learned this about things, and I've had other experience. I can't tell you them all because it takes a long time. But I understand this. If I would have grew up in a traditional Latter-day Saint home, I would be the worst kind of human being ever because I'm so temperamental, I'm so petty, I'm so uh, uppity, and I'm so everything that God doesn't want me to be. But because of my past, it's humbled me to know that even the best of us can fall way short of what God's hope is for us. And these experiences have helped me help others in such a significant way. So when I'm talking to Steven,
Yep.
when I'm talking to my friends at work who are not religious or anybody else, and I'm conveying a message to them of how to change small things in their lives so that they can have a better relationship with their spouses or their children or anything that looks like that. When those changes and compel them to come to me and say, AJ, thank you so much for helping me through my difficulties with my wife, through my difficulties with my children. All these other people that have done this, help me for getting me off drugs and things like that.
Sure.
I have a unique position where I have seen I've lived a life that doesn't resemble Christ at all. Now I live a different life. I don't know if I still can meet the standard of a Christ-like life, but I'm trying. And I do everything I can to get there. But because I have that connection between the two sides, it helps me be a better human being for
Well,
one.
right. You can relate to other people that others
Probably
wouldn't be
now.
able to because of your past
Yeah.
experiences, right?
And it's
And
humble. Yeah.
Yeshua gives us what we need. Now the question is, do we listen to it and learn from it? But I forget the verse, but I think it's Paul. Now don't quote me on that part too much, but in the New Testament where he brings out that Yahweh put men in their life at the time that they did on purpose, so that way they could get what they needed, right?
Yeah. Well, Jesus comes at the exact time that he needs to come. You know, we're going to get into this, but we're not doing it now. Let's talk again, and I'll give you all the time that you need. And I know that you are the one that came on with me one time with Paul G and people like that. Is that right?
I've never been on with you.
No, you haven't been. Then I'm sorry. There's another person that talks similar to your Genesis thought process on the 1,000-year periods that are.
Oh yeah, I'm not the only one that has that. I believe there's a
Right.
few others, but it's not talked about a lot.
Right.
I have an unfinished post where I bring out a lot of things that I need to finish. But
There was another gentleman that came on. I'm going to go back to that and make sure I contact him. Maybe we can all get together. But if you don't
sure.
mind, I mean, obviously we're trying to get our name out there, not because we're trying to get our name out there, but because we love the conversation. We love the fact that we might be able to touch somebody to help others people out. And these are good conversations. If you every once in a while you want to
Sure, I'm happy to.
tell your story the same way, you're more than welcome.
Sure, if you want me to. I'm personally not too worried about my name, as a lot of people don't like my name.
Well, I don't think it's the name. I think it's just
I'm
more
one to help people seed thoughts that helps them out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they'll keep talking to me, I'll keep explaining things and why I believe the way I do, and show it from scriptures. I'm pretty big on that myself.
Well, very good. And like I said, just keeping the conversation alive about our Father in heaven, Jesus Christ and Yahweh. Those conversations are a must in this world. And every time we get a chance to do these things, every time we get a chance to share them with people, it at least illuminates one person or a small group, and it just continues to grow from there.
Sure. And if you want, I host things once a week on lunar Sabbaths and new moons. Okay. So occasionally more than once a week. You're welcome to come.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Now, make sure you send a link to me and all that, and invite me, and I'll do the best I can. I'm doing I got a debate with Travis Anderson and Mark Boyan next week. Mormons.
Or are those other Mormons? The names.
Well, they're chastising me because they tell me I don't have the skill or the knowledge to get into discussions and debates with other religious people. And I'm like, okay.
So here's something for you to think. So let me do something for you, okay? To help you out with your discussion, okay?
All right.
Let me share the scripture. So let's go D&C 4, which I would imagine they believe in, right?
I don't know what they believe in.
Okay.
Instead of going after a theological question, the debate will be on Protestantism.
Oh, so are these other
They're members of
Mormons
the
that you're
church.
debating with, or other?
No, they're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Right. Okay. So they I hope they believe in D&C 4. Okay. But so here, let's read here. I'll let you read it. Go read verse 3.
Okay, it says, therefore, if ye have desires to serve God, ye are called to the work.
Oh wait, so wait a minute. This doesn't say if someone laid their hands upon you, you were called. This
Or
says if you
you're
have
a scholar,
desires.
yeah, or if you're a scholar, where's a scholar in there?
No, it's not in there. It's the thing that I'm bringing out for you
Yeah,
is desire. If you have the desire, you're called.
yeah, absolutely.
Now, but I will also say, as Yeshua, and I don't remember this section, we could go find it, but when Hiram and Joseph Smith just wanted to go out and just teach, they said, Yahweh told them, wait a little season and learn. Okay. Learn what you're going to teach before you learn it, because obviously they didn't learn everything initially, but they were teaching still, right? So there is a balancing act. If you have desires, you are called, but at the same time, you need to learn what you're going to teach before you go out and teach it.
Right. Absolutely. Hey, all right, Steve. Is it Steve or Stephen? Which one do you like?
I prefer Stephen.
Stephen. All right, Stephen. Well, it's been a great honor, and I really appreciate your audience and listening to me ramble on for a while. People.
Well, it wasn't complete rambling. You were telling me your history and how parts of your history and makes you believe that the LDS Church is true. So
yeah, it's crazy stuff. But thanks everybody. If you watch this on YouTube, or I really appreciate if you make a comment, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and put the like on there. And like I said, I really appreciate. Me and Stephen will come back, and we'll share some time again together. And I'm going to make sure I put links on to his blogs and his podcast. Is that right?
So it's not. I would call it a podcast, but I guess I can understand why people would. But so let me share my screen again. It's my church.
Oh, you got a church?
Well, loosely.
Yes.
It's not formally organized, okay? Because I don't have the Melchizedek priesthood. That's a whole nother debate, and I'm happy to talk about it. But I don't have the authority to start a church, and so that's mainly what I'm getting at. But I'm fine calling it a church because it's a group of believers. Okay.
Good. Here's the crazy thing. I went to a Baptist Bible study for years. I still want to go back, and whenever the time change happens for our award, then I'll be able to get back. But I've even invited people to go to that, and they don't want to go.
Oh,
it's not about no longer it's about theology. People just don't want to be.
Sure. I like going places in other people's churches. The problem is a lot of times when they find out what I've done this, when they start finding out what I believe, they don't want me there. So
they even offered me a place to teach at their church.
Well, you should have took it. But anyways,
well, I mean, I time changes and all that, and COVID and everything else. I didn't get a chance.
Sure.
But at least they were invited to it. You know what I mean? I can't even get my own ward to do that for me.
You can't get your own ward to do what?
Give me a teaching position.
Oh well.
scary.
Well, maybe one day we can talk about church government.
Yeah,
I'll
there
leave
you
it at
go.
that for you.
Political
Unless you want to
anymore.
start getting into it. But so
Okay,
here's
come on.
what I do. Okay. So this is Moroni 6-9. Okay.
Okay.
And their meetings, church, okay, were conducted by the church, so there's church, after the manner of the workings of the Spirit. And by the power of the Holy Spirit, for as the power of the Holy Spirit led them whether to preach, to exhort, to pray, to supplicate, or to sing, or it was done. Even so it was done. So mainly what I'm bringing out, according to 6-9, lessons are not planned out years in advance. I don't do that.
Gotcha.
I have no idea what I'm doing beforehand. There are a few exceptions. There have been multiple times the week before a high holiday, I'll have some things somewhat planned of what to talk about, but you can go watch them. You can tell I don't have a lesson plan, but I have a subject in mind.
Yeah, I've had 12 pages of lesson plan, and I didn't teach from none of it.
Well, that's good. You should go by the Spirit, and
Exactly.
I do believe you should address what people bring up, and that should be the highest concern, and not worry about finishing a lesson. Because if you want to help people, you help them with their questions and their concerns, not finish the lesson because I was told to by a committee that planned it years in advance.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, all right, my friend Stephen, it's been a great pleasure. My daughter just showed up today from LA, so I want to spend.
Oh, well, have fun with her.
And it's been great. And like I said, make sure you keep me posted on your on the on when you have
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you
ready
info.
for me to come on your channel, and I appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you.
Are you going to come in on tomorrow night on that?
Yeah, I'll come tomorrow night.
Got him hooked.
Well,
that'll be great.
Although we see some things differently, we both believe in Yeshua as the promised Messiah, and that Joseph Smith is a prophet, and the Book of Mormon is the Word of God. So
thank you very much. Ready? 1, 2, 3.